Let me start by saying that I am not a dramatic person by nature. I don't like conflict, I never have. I'm the kind of guy who would rather put his head down, work harder, and let results speak for themselves than waste energy fighting people who have already made up their minds about him. And that philosophy, that quiet, exhausting, relentless philosophy, is the only reason I survived my childhood. Because growing up in my family was not growing up in a family at all. It was growing up in an audition you were always going to fail. My brother and I are the same age, 27, both of us. And from the very first moment, I was old enough to understand what was happening around me. I understood one thing with complete clarity. My parents had a favorite. They weren't subtle about it. They weren't even trying to hide it. My brother was the golden child, the one who got the praise, the attention, the celebrations, the benefit of every single doubt. And I was the other one, the one who existed in the background of his story, the one who was expected to smile and clap and feel grateful just for being allowed to watch. I want to give you one example, just one, that explains everything you need to know about how I was raised. When I was 17 years old, I got an acceptance letter to college, a real one, a competitive program, something I had worked for, something I had earned entirely on my own, without a single word of encouragement from the people who were supposed to be in my corner. And I remember holding that letter thinking, this is it. This is the moment they finally see me. I came home to a party. Balloons, cake, the whole thing. And for about 30 seconds, I actually believed it was for me. Then I saw the cake. It had my brother's name on it. My parents had thrown him a party for getting into a program that was, by any honest measure, significantly less competitive than mine. And when I asked them about it, when I stood there holding my acceptance letter and asked why they hadn't done anything for me, they told me, with completely straight faces, that they hadn't wanted my brother to feel left out, that instead of expecting recognition, I should be focused on uplifting him. That was the day I made a decision. I left the moment I turned 18. I never looked back. I put myself through college on loans and part-time jobs. I rented a tiny apartment with a friend when I graduated. I built a career from nothing, with no safety net and no applause and nobody checking in on me. My parents never called. I never called them. And for years, that silence was the most peaceful thing in my life. Then, about 2 years ago, my brother reached out. He found me online and sent a message saying that our parents missed me, that things had changed, that they wanted to reconnect. And I want to be honest with you about something. I knew better. Some part of me absolutely knew better. But I had never fully dealt with what my family had done to me. I had buried it under work and distance and forward momentum, but it was still there. That wound that every child carries when the people who were supposed to love them unconditionally simply didn't. So I said yes. We met. It was awkward. It was uncomfortable. But they were making an effort, or what looked like an effort, and I felt obligated to meet them halfway. So I started letting them back in. I invited them to my home. And that, as I would later understand with painful clarity, was my first mistake. Because I was married at that point, I had been with my wife for a couple of years. We'd built a good life together, and I was genuinely happy. The kind of happy I hadn't really known how to be before. She was warm and funny and sharp, and I loved her. When I introduced her to my family, I didn't think twice about it. Why would I? They were my family. She was my wife. My brother and my wife started talking. And then they kept talking. And then I stopped being in those conversations at all. 6 months later, my wife sat me down and told me she was pregnant. And I felt a joy I don't really have words for. I had come so far from that kid who left home at 18 with nothing. I had a career, a house, and now a baby on the way. Things were good. They were not good. Something changed after that conversation. My brother started coming around more. At first I told myself it was just family excitement. A baby was coming. People get involved. But then I noticed the way he'd walk into a room and immediately orbit her. The way he'd put his hand on her stomach and lean down and speak into it, quietly, like he was sharing something. the way she'd let him. She told me I was being paranoid when I brought it up. I let it go for a while. 6 months into her pregnancy, when she was asleep, I went through her phone. I am not going to pretend that was a proud moment. It wasn't. But when you already know something and you're just waiting for proof, it doesn't feel like snooping. It feels like finally giving yourself permission to believe what your gut has been screaming at you for months. The texts confirmed everything. My brother and my wife had been together since almost the moment they met. They had been conducting a full relationship right under my roof, right under my nose, and the baby I had been so unspeakably happy about, was his, not mine, his. And there was more. They had a plan. The plan was to keep lying to me until after the baby was born. Then she would tell me about the affair, file for divorce, and between the alimony and child support, they would live comfortably off of my income. They had discussed this in writing, calmly, like it was a logistics problem, and I was just an inconvenient variable. I sat with that information for a long time that night. The next morning I confronted her. She denied it first, of course she did. But when I told her I'd read the texts, the denial collapsed. She admitted everything. And just like that, 2 years of marriage and the family I thought I was building were over. I filed for divorce. My parents, naturally, sided against me. When my brother and my ex announced on social media that they were together and planning to marry, my entire family rallied around them. There was no acknowledgement of what my brother had done. There was no acknowledgement of the lies, the manipulation, the plan to use me financially. My parents told me I should be happy for them, that this was all for the best, that I should join the celebration. I cut them all off again, immediately, without hesitation. But it cost me. Because when the divorce proceedings began, my family didn't just stay out of it, they got involved. My ex and her lawyer built a story that I was toxic, controlling, that I had forced her to quit her job, that I had a temper and a misogynistic attitude, and my parents backed every single word of it up. They told the court that the reason they had distanced themselves from me years ago was because of my behavior. They buried me. I was already emotionally shredded. I was depressed in a way I hadn't been since childhood. I didn't fight back. I didn't have the energy. I just agreed to the settlement, paid the alimony, and let her walk away with a significant chunk of what I had built. She got money. She got my car. I got to keep the house. I told myself, it's done. Move forward. And I did. I drowned myself in work. I cut out every distraction. I pushed and pushed and pushed until the exhaustion became its own kind of rhythm. And somewhere in that rhythm, I found something that felt like peace, or at least like the absence of the worst kind of pain. 2 weeks ago, I got promoted. Better position, better salary, company car. Everything I had worked toward clicking into place at exactly the right moment. I was proud of myself in a way that felt private and enormous and completely mine. So I went to one of my favorite restaurants alone, ordered something good, and posted a photo online. I should have known better. Within a day, my mother contacted me. She said she wanted to see me. I ignored it. She called again, and again. And then she showed up at my office and refused to leave, and got into a physical altercation with my receptionist, which was humiliating for everyone involved. And I had to promise her a visit just to make her leave. A few days later, I went. My ex-wife was asleep. My brother wasn't home. My parents sat me down in the house they had apparently moved into using the settlement money that had come out of my divorce, the house that my loss had paid for. And after about 5 minutes of silence, my father told me that my brother had lost his job, that the alimony and settlement weren't enough to support their household anymore, that they were struggling, that they had seen my promotion post. And they asked me for money. I sat there for what felt like a very long time. Then I stood up and walked toward the door. I didn't say anything. I didn't yell. I didn't explain myself. I just left. It was raining outside, one of those heavy, drenching rains that soaks through everything in seconds. I was looking for my keys in my pocket when I heard the door open behind me, and my parents and my brother came out after me. My brother, who had built his entire identity on being superior to me, who had been smug and condescending every single time I'd been forced to share the same air as him, was standing in the rain asking me for help. I looked at all three of them, and I told them that they could beg on the streets if they needed money, because a stranger would be more likely to take pity on them than I was. Then I got in my car and drove away. I'm not going to pretend that wasn't satisfying. But for a few days after, the guilt crept in. That specific guilt that children who were never loved properly carry like a splinter. The one that makes you question whether refusing to be used is the same thing as being cruel. My mother was texting me constantly, and part of me started to wonder if maybe I had enough, and maybe sending a little money was just the practical thing to do. Then my brother came to my house. He stood in my doorway and told me that while he felt sorry about my childhood, he couldn't help the fact that he was just inherently better than me. That was why our parents had always treated him the way they did. He told me I was being childish by holding grudges, that I should help them because they were family, and that refusing was just pettiness dressed up as principle. I laughed. I genuinely laughed. I told him that instead of standing on my doorstep lecturing me about maturity, he should probably be out looking for a job. That landed. He started yelling. He said I was jealous, that our parents preferred him, that my own wife had preferred him, and that my refusal to give money was just revenge dressed up as dignity. I agreed with him, completely, cheerfully, without an ounce of sarcasm. I told him, yes, you're right. That's exactly what this is, and there's nothing you can do about it. He told me he would make me pay. He told me he would find a way to force the money out of me. I closed the door. A few days after that, my ex-wife called. She started calmly. She acknowledged that I had no obligation to help after everything that had happened. She expressed understanding and sympathy, and framed the whole thing as me having an opportunity to be the bigger person. Then she brought up my parents paying for my upbringing, and the effort she had made to be a good wife. I reminded her that her version of being a good wife had included a secret relationship with my brother and a detailed financial plan to exploit my divorce. She started crying. When the crying didn't work, she told me that she was going to file for a higher alimony amount given my promotion, and that she would drag me back into court. I told her I'd see her there. Here is where I need to explain something. The first time we went through the divorce, I was not okay. I was barely functioning. I was running on empty in every possible sense, and I just wanted it to be over, so I didn't fight. I didn't gather evidence. I didn't dispute their claims or call witnesses or do any of the things I could have done. I just let them take what they wanted, because the alternative was continuing to sit in that room with those people, and I couldn't do it. This time was different. This time, I was ready. I contacted every friend we had in common and told them the full story, not a version of it, not a highlight reel, all of it, from the affair to the texts to the plan they had laid out to drain me financially. Most of them hadn't known the real reason we had separated. They were stunned. And when I asked them to testify on my behalf if it came to that, almost all of them said yes without hesitation. I got my lawyer involved immediately and told him I didn't just want to fight the new alimony claim. I wanted to revisit the original settlement entirely. I wanted it on record that she had cheated, that my family had lied in the original proceedings, and that the story they had told about my character was fabricated. Then I started collecting evidence. I reached out to cousins, people I was never particularly close to, but who had grown up watching my family treat me as an outsider. People who had seen it with their own eyes for years. I asked them if they would speak to what they had witnessed. They agreed. I had friends record video testimonials. I built a file of documented interactions that demonstrated the pattern of behavior my family had exhibited throughout this entire situation. My lawyer looked at what we had assembled and told me it was airtight. When we got to court and my ex's legal team presented their argument for increased alimony, we presented ours. The testimonials, the evidence, the documented lies. My family had nothing. They sat there with absolutely nothing to counter any of it, because it was all true, and they had never for a single moment thought I would have the energy or the nerve to fight back. They had counted on the version of me that had been ground down by everything that had happened. They expected the man who had just quietly signed papers and handed over money to make the pain stop. That man was gone. The court ruled that I would no longer be required to pay alimony. Not reduced, not modified. Gone. I walked out of that courthouse feeling something I don't have a clean word for. It was relief and satisfaction and grief all mixed together. Because even at that moment, even with everything, there was some small part of me that mourned the family I never got to have. The brother who should have been my ally, the parents who should have been proud. But that morning was quiet and brief, because I had takeout to order and a movie to watch and a life to get back to. I was nearly home when I saw my brother's car parked outside my house. All three of them were waiting on my doorstep. My mother, my father, my brother, standing outside my door like some sort of last stand. My father started immediately, lecturing me about shame, about responsibility, about how I had betrayed my family by refusing to support them when they needed me most. I said nothing. My mother demanded that I show my father respect and speak to him. I said nothing. They got louder, they got more agitated, and I could see it happening in real time. The escalation that comes when people realize their manipulation isn't working and they have nothing left but volume. Then my brother grabbed me by the collar. He pulled back his fist. My father caught his arm before it landed. And my brother stood there, held back, screaming at me about how I was a jealous loser who would never amount to anything. The unemployed man, living with his parents, begging his brother for money, screaming about being the better one. I told them they had 5 minutes to leave my property before I called the police. And seeing as they were currently broke, a visit from law enforcement was probably not in their best interest. They left. And they have not contacted me since. Now let me tell you about someone else. Because while my story is one kind of wound, I came across another man's story recently that hit me in a different way. Not because it was like mine, but because it reminded me of how many different shapes this kind of pain can take. This man, 33 years old, had built his entire daily existence around his wife and her daughter. He woke up at 6 in the morning. He maintained their house, cared for their animals, managed their property, and helped part-time at the law firm where she worked. Some nights, he was still going at 2 in the morning. He had donated his own car when she asked him to. He had folded himself completely into her life and her daughter's life and done it willingly because he loved them. Then one December, he walked into a house that wasn't his wife's to find her with another man, the father of her daughter, a man he had spent years keeping off their property. He tried to forgive her. Every time he caught her making plans with other men, every inappropriate message, every lie she told him with a straight face, he tried to push through it. And she used that willingness to push through against him. She told him his pain was his fault. She used guilt and threats to force intimacy when he had made clear he wasn't ready. When she got pregnant, and there was every reason to believe the baby wasn't his, she went and got an abortion the moment he asked for a DNA test, and then blamed him for that too. He finally left. He walked away from his job, his home, his car, his stepdaughter, and the family he had tried to build. He ended up dependent on his own family, just to have a roof over his head and food to eat. His mental health collapsed. Getting out of bed in the morning became a victory. Being around friends left him sobbing on the drive home. He described feeling broken in a way that wasn't getting better. And he was the one being punished. The person who had lied and manipulated and taken everything was fine, moving forward. And he was the one sitting in a borrowed room, trying to remember how to feed himself. His divorce hearing eventually came. He had heard through friends that his ex planned to bring the other man with her as a final act of cruelty. He went anyway, supported by people who cared about him, and kept a calm expression through the entire proceeding. She arrived alone. They signed the papers. The judge finalized it. And on the way out, mixed in with his mail, he found a note. The other man hadn't come because he'd gotten a different woman pregnant. The man his wife had thrown her marriage away for, the one she had risked everything for, was out there creating the same chaos with someone else. His own child called him by his first name. His mother had cried on Christmas out of gratitude that this man had been in her granddaughter's life, because her own son was so absent. And now there was another baby, another woman, another mess. And she had chosen that, over someone who woke up at 6 in the morning and gave everything he had. He wrote that he felt very alone that day, that he was bouncing between elation and silence, that he had expected to feel better and didn't quite know what he felt. He ended by saying, "I wish none of us was suffering." Both of these stories come from real places and real pain. But what runs through both of them, the thread that connects a man who fought back and won and a man still learning to stand back up, is this: the people who betray us almost always count on us being too depleted to respond. They count on the weight of the history, the guilt, the love that was real, even when everything around it was manufactured. They count on you being too tired and too hurt to do anything but absorb it and move on. And sometimes, for a while, they're right. But the thing about people who were never loved correctly is that they develop a very particular kind of resilience. Not the loud kind. Not the kind that announces itself. The quiet kind. The kind that just keeps going until one day it turns around. To the first man, enjoy the takeout. Enjoy the silence. You earned it. To the second man, the fact that you wish no one was suffering, including the person who hurt you, is not weakness. That is the distance between you and the people who used you. Hold on to it. You're going to be okay. Both of you.